Good evening once again, gents.
Good evening.
Hello.
Second time this evening. So this is our serious video as opposed to our earlier fun and debacles. So aim of the video this evening, gents, is we've been checking around our social media channels, all the various different streams that we have across different platforms, and a lot of people have been discussing that something doesn't quite feel right with Starfleet in the new season of Discovery in the 32nd century. So we're going to take a look at that. I've got a few questions that I've picked out from various different channels. So we're going to jump straight into it with this question. Okay, so your starting question is, why does Admiral Vance seem to have a problem with practically every decision that Saru makes? James?
Because all of Saru's decisions are rubbish.
Well,
Saru is entirely emotionally led. He argues for things like, oh, well, I must go and visit this system because I think my sister's on a ship there. He's not impartial. He's not objective. He has the only ship in the entire fleet that has warp capability, or at least extended warp capability. And the Admiral, who has the task of looking after the entirety of Starfleet, is therefore marshalling carefully his most precious resource. Simple as.
Yeah, I get that. Do you really think, though, the Commander-in-Chief of Starfleet, even with the position and the crippled position, so to speak, that we know Starfleet's in because of the burn, do you really think he'd be micromanaging every asset the same way he seems to be? He's even micromanaging almost down to individual officers on those ships. Where's the point in having captains?
I don't think he's micromanaging when he says, I don't want Discovery romping off on a mission of its own when you're the only ship we have that can get to any emergency when we need it to. He's got one Discovery.
True.
And that's it. You know, if they lose Discovery, they've got no fallback.
Yeah, but on that front, if that's the case, why then, when there's an imminent threat from the Emerald Chain, does he say, oh yeah, it's okay for you to run off to the edge of the Gamma Quadrant, we'll deal with the Emerald Chain?
I mean, I wonder if it's a degree of almost jealousy. I wonder if Vance is jealous of the fact that Saru represents what Starfleet should be, you know, going off and being around the galaxy, and he isn't. He is now looking after a crippled organization. They are running scared. They are hiding, and it reminds me of where he thinks he really should be. I wonder if there's some sort of jealousy feature there, or resentment that he's not doing what Saru can do.
Well, if that were the case, Dan, Vance is a fleet admiral, and he could just kick Saru off Discovery and take command of it himself. He could say, well, this is now my flagship.
And let's not forget, Saru technically has never officially been appointed captain of the Discovery.
Well, you're wondering if they have 900-year-old paperwork still in the archive, aren't you?
Oh, he hasn't. He was given he was given temporary command, and then between him and Burnham, they decided Saru would run it.
I think the point
is not based on a committee; it's based on being appointed.
Yeah, and Saru is technically appointed.
I think the point you made there about having a bit of resentment for Saru, you've got to remember that Discovery have arrived with a spore drive, so all of a sudden they've got the opportunity to represent what Starfleet should be about. They can actually go out there and explore, which the Federation can't at the moment, and presumably haven't been able to do for some time.
Yeah.
Discovery's arrived, they've got the opportunity to do what really the Federation should be doing, not what they've had to be doing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some interesting comments that are coming in off the viewers. I'm not sure if you've seen these, Carl.
I'll go for it.
I mean, the one that's just grabbed me was this one.
Doesn't trust Kelpians, it seems.
Ooh, I wonder why.
Could it be as simple as something race, you know?
Possibly. I don't know, because he
In the
did
32nd century, we'll still have racism.
he did mention that they are still occasionally in touch with Kelpians, didn't he? He said they were on sort of like the outer limits of where they could contact, and last time he checked, everything was still status quo. So I don't know.
May I ask a question, Carl? I think you're more tuned into Discovery than I am. What is the Starfleet capability for warp travel? Do they still have it, but they've only got some dilithium and not very much, so they can only use it sparingly? Have they only got up to like warp 3? What's the situation?
They've not particularly defined it. There doesn't seem to be any sort of speed limitation to it. There's not been a mention of that at all throughout the series. The only limitation that's been put on anything is the resource itself, the dilithium. So if the resource is scarce, presumably then flying at higher speed needs the better reactions, therefore would use up potentially more dilithium because that's the reaction controlling agent. So that's the only thing you could put to it in theory. The mentions of, when he was handing out different missions a few episodes ago to different captains of ships, oh, you go and do this, it'll take you 3 months and we'll see you in a few months' time. Various different things to people, but there's not actually been any definition put as to if
I think the theme is that galactic travel has suddenly become more exclusive, which I think is a great writing direction to take.
Yeah, and I think as well, because they're totally uncertain. Well, that's another point we need to chat about maybe, but as of yet, we as the viewers are completely uncertain as to what exactly caused the burn. And part of the thing from the third episode, People of Earth.
Are you familiar with the Genesis device?
Yeah.
Have you heard of the plot device?
Yep. Well, the potential is that they don't know what caused the burn. It could have been a one-off, or it could happen again. So I suppose limiting warp travel is a way of limiting any potential disasters should it happen again.
I mean, a question that's been asked in the comments by this gentleman was, what about making more spore drives?
Yeah.
Why haven't in that refit section for Discovery, when Discovery's been refitted and all the smart matter's been put in and the gel controls and stuff, why hasn't someone scanned a lot of it and just said, right, we're going to insert this into everything in the fleet?
I'm really sorry, I can't remember the specifics, but this was addressed in season 2 when they were on about duplicating the spore drive, and they couldn't because insert science here. I can't remember the specifics as to why.
But
I know it can't be
set in the 23rd century,
Yeah.
whereas we're now in the 32nd century.
Well,
And
presumably the laws of physics can't be broken or bent in this particular.
Well, take us back 1,000 years from where we are today. It's talking about, could you challenge, say, the Ford Corporation not to build, I don't know, a trebuchet?
Okay, well, let me put it this way, James. Alcohol has been around since the dawn of time. Have they cured a hangover? Some problems are just always going to be there. That's the thing.
Well, they have some.
I'm fairly certain, and hope someone who follows Discovery close to know, I'm fairly certain this has been addressed in season 2 of Discovery when they're on about duplicating the spore drive, and for some insert plot relevant science here, they just can't. So
yeah. Interesting question from Megan there. Could the ship, so the Kelpian ship in the nebula, so we know that it arrived there before the burn because they were sent to investigate a dilithium nursery. So she's suggesting there, could the ship in the nebula be somewhat responsible for the burn? And the mistrust of Kelpians has been ingrained into the Admiral while he was growing up.
So we think the Kelpians could be the villain of season 3.
Maybe not the villain. Maybe they made a mistake when they were investigating this dilithium nursery. Maybe as they were scanning it somehow, they've had some sort of adverse reaction.
Now, did you see Megan's other comment, Carl? The one that was just above that one?
So this particular one here about the Admiral double-cross the Discovery and blame everything on them so that the Emerald Chain goes after the crew instead. Interesting. See, again, the other point about the good old Admiral here is that he doesn't seem to be adverse to hanging around with this guy.
David Cronenberg.
So another question that's been asked on one of our channels is, are they hiding something?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, they are. Of course they are.
Are they in collusion and hiding something? Do they know more about this than they're letting on?
Here's the question, though. If you're 900 years in advance of the discovery that turns up, you have capabilities potentially vastly in excess of anything that they might have.
Yeah.
Why would you need a hidden agenda when you could just seize from them anything that you needed?
Well, let's extrapolate that then, James. Let's think of a reason why they would. Perhaps it was actually the Federation that caused the burn.
What if it's that you're not trying to take something from them, but hide something from them? Because Burnham and Saru's whole aim of this season is to discover the cause of the burn.
Now,
to try and bring the Federation back together.
Now, I'm going to throw out a slightly left of field option here. There's lots of talk of Burnham wanted to find the Federation. And the Federation had founder worlds, of which we know there are several of the founder worlds that we know of and we've already come across. And then we've come across Starfleet, and they have been very much a separate thing. Starfleet and the Federation are no longer it's no longer one and the same entity. It is very much this is Starfleet,
a few people, yeah,
and this is the Federation. And was it Starfleet that caused it? Was it the Federation? Was it a Starfleet experiment? Was it a way to start a war? Was it a way to obliterate your enemies? There's so many possible plot options for this, which is
well, again, that particular point, funnily enough, is one of the questions that I'd picked up from, I think it was one of the Facebook comments I saw, and that was, is it plausible that Starfleet and the Federation are no longer guided by the principles we've come to know from watching them over the last 50 years? So, and a few other points that were made in that same thread, as I recall when I was reading it, were, are the Federation and Starfleet no longer the same entity? Have they separated ways?
That would explain the resentment that they're having for Discovery, certainly. It's a very real, I think it's a very real resentment. I don't think it's imagined. I think anyone who's watched it can see it feels like they've welcomed them back through necessity rather than anything else.
Yeah.
It feels more militarist. What's the word I'm looking for?
Militaristic.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and a comment that's come through regarding why the spore drive can't be changed, just come through from one of our viewers. I think it has to do with the tardigrade DNA. I think that's why Stamets, who does have the tardigrade DNA...
Yeah, I think they have to capture another tardigrade and butcher it or whatever to do it again. And
yeah. And of course, what Stamets did in the original series, in theory, was illegal anyway, because it was DNA manipulation. So it shouldn't have been done, really. Yeah, good point.
Very naughty.
Exceedingly so. So yeah, could it be
do you remember that scene where the tardigrade murders the security officer? That was brilliant.
Yeah, just comes out a complete rampage.
Sorry, getting off topic there.
She's done very well for a character who's been killed off. She's appeared in 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah, she's not doing too bad at all. Now, another thing that was posed, kind of similar in relation to what we've just been saying, was somebody had mentioned Senatal's message. You remember that from episode 2, Burnham had that message that she'd found. And they asked, could it indicate that he was in fact no longer part of what is now Starfleet and was searching for people who still believe in the great ideals of the Federation instead? Now, off the back of that, I grabbed that message. So I'm just going to pop that up quickly for us to listen to. So just bear that question in mind while we have a listen to this particular video. Just let me throw that up.
This is Admiral Senatal. I will wait for any who would join us on Earth. Anyone who still believes in us. The Federation lives on, but we need...
Is he at Starfleet headquarters?
It's only a very short message, and it says about him being on Earth basically 12 years ago, but we know that Earth hasn't been part of the Federation for over 100 years. So what's gone on there?
Right. Well, my theory is this. We talked about, or I said how there is now very 2 distinct arms. There's the Federation and there's Starfleet. I wonder if there has been some sort of galactic fallout between the 2 of them. And
it feels like a military coup, doesn't it?
Yeah. Has we know Earth, as I said, we don't want, we've got our thing, we don't deal with Starfleet. to nick a Star Warsism, if that makes sense, is Senator essentially, trying to raise a rebel army? Is he a Princess Leia?
It's a trap.
No, help me, you're my only hope. Come here, all the rest of it. Is it what he's after?
I suspect it feels a lot like something has happened whereby, by necessity, Starfleet has had to separate from its path of peaceful discovery by necessity. It would be, and at that point, Starfleet and the Federation have come at odds.
Yeah, the party.
The party ways, and I think something has definitely split the empire, if you will. It's something split the Federation, something split Starfleet. It's definitely got something to do with the burn.
Yeah.
If I was a betting man, which I am, I would say the Federation Starfleet have got something to do with the burn.
I would even potentially go so far as to say that what we've seen so far isn't the Federation, it is just Starfleet.
I wonder if Starfleet got a bit hungry for resources, or they said how things were starting to run out and things were starting to. Did Starfleet start messing around with time travel? Did they cause the Time War? Did everyone else realize that you could manipulate time for your own advantage? Are we going to come into the Time War? Was the Starfleet had a very bad thing in it? It's I think Time War is going to come back to this again. It was a big thing in Enterprise. It's going to come back.
I'm not. I'm going to disagree with you there, and I don't think the temporal Cold War is going to come into it with Discovery, because every discussion they've had. Every discussion they've had when the temporal Cold War has been brought up is that it was crap, and we've all had to behave ourselves since then. For me, it's felt like that's them cutting off any more time travel, because they've shot Discovery forward, and they don't want to say this is going to be going backwards and forwards and parallel dimensions and all that sort of stuff. For me, it's felt very much like we're going to say it's a temporal Cold War, that's why we don't do it anymore, and that's put a bed to it. So I respect your opinion, but I think you're wrong with that one. I don't think I think they're deliberately cutting off that avenue of plot, at least for the time being.
Now, there's an interesting point again from one of the YouTube guys. So saying they think Admiral Tal was maybe trying to restore relations with Earth, but was attacked by either Vance or Osira or both. Now, that's an interesting point, because when you think Osira's the Orion in charge of the Emerald Chain, the lady.
Ah, right, yeah.
Now, if you think timeline-wise, so what we know is Earth left the Federation around or just after the time of the burn. Admiral Tal was on Earth 12 years prior to Discovery's arrival. Number one, why would that be? Now, also, Tal must have been killed on the ship that Adira and Grey were on for Grey to have received the symbiont the way that he did. So Tal was obviously on his way somewhere. Now, when Discovery does get to Starfleet headquarters, Adira then, if I remember correctly, apologizes to Admiral Vance, saying that Senna never meant to keep him waiting. But Vance's answer to that is very sort of like cold shoulders to her, and he sends them off for a straightforward diagnostic, not any sort of medical, a diagnostic. He seems very cold towards them, and he blurts out the line of, well, Senna and I were familiar, you and I are not. But that's not the sort of thing you say about a friend. Not in the tone he was using, Senna and I were familiar, you and I are not.
What's been depicted with the way that Trills interact with previous host friends wouldn't rub with that at all, would it? It's completely different. They're normally quite happy to see old friends, even if they're in a different body. So yeah.
Oh yeah, you look at when
Benjamin Sisko.
You look at when Kor met Jadzia. It was like, Curzon, my old friend. Well, I'm Jadzia now. Jadzia, my old friend.
Yeah, it's very and she was Jadzia's partnership. She was very happy to see him in the capacity of an old friend. So that's. You're right. There's something
you use saying they were familiar. Well, you can be very familiar with your enemy. It doesn't make you friends. So again, could it be that Vance is heading up Starfleet, but when you think about the message that Tal put out, was he kind of spearheading what was left of the Federation? Is he looking for people that believe in the ideals of the Federation as opposed to Starfleet?
Are you thinking that Vance was almost doing the Spock role in reunification, but in this instance trying to bring Starfleet and the Federation back together?
No, I think Senator Tal might have been trying to do that.
Sorry, for Senator Tal, yes, my mistake.
Yeah, potentially.
So here's an
Forgive me if I've
interesting.
misunderstood this, but doesn't the character who prefers to be addressed using the pronoun they, I forget their name.
Blue Del Barrio, or the
That's
character.
the actress, isn't it?
Yeah, the character's Adira.
Adira.
Yeah.
Doesn't Adira carry the Trill symbiont who was Senator Tal? So the symbiont, I imagine, is Tal.
Yes.
And we know from our experience of Trill that they carry all their memories without any significant interruption.
They do.
So would this character not be fully aware of whatever Senator Tal was thinking?
Funny you should mention that, because again, something else that was brought up by someone on one of the channels. So it sounds very preempted, this, doesn't it? But genuinely, it's not. So I grabbed a screen grab because it was something that was brought up by someone else, and that was saying, why haven't we heard any more about Senna since Adira connected with the symbiont? And not just Senna, you know, there's you look at those pictures from when the circle was completed and, you know, Adira fully connected with that symbiont, then there's 3 Starfleet officers as former hosts of that symbiont.
Now, the middle one we can see is wearing a Picard era uniform, which we know is late 24th, early 25th century. So still 700 years before Discovery is now set. The one on the far right appears to be wearing a uniform equivalent to those we've seen kicking around in the 32nd century. So we've got 2 characters here, you know, 2 incarnations of this symbiote who are effectively contemporary, and one that is centuries old. Unless you're going to tell me, of course, that Starfleet uses that particularly drab uniform for 700 years.
I think
plot-wise, you can be quite confident they can write off any inconsistencies because of the unorthodox joining of a Trill with a non-Trill. So they can wipe that out. That's not an issue.
Yeah. Now here's an interesting one as well. I think Asira knows more about the burn than we think. Quite possible. Maybe that's the source of the resentment that Asira has and the chain has towards the authority of the Federation. It may not just simply be a rival organization, because of course there's also a lot of mentions. So Rin the Andorian, you know, he told the tale of, oh, if you want to scare an Andorian child, you say you're sending them to Federation summer camp. Now, that's not the sort of tale that you hear about the Federation, is it?
Do you think, and this has just come to me literally this moment, do you think perhaps we've got 2 federations, 2 Starfleets out there? Do you think perhaps we've
what, like Bucks Fizz? Were they separated?
I think I'm wondering if perhaps we've got the Federation or Starfleet, if you will, that we've seen, and actually another one.
Possibly.
I mean, that's a possibility. I had an idea when Carl first approached me about doing this yesterday, and he was like, "What do you think?" We haven't practiced or reversed any of this. He just said, "What do you think might have happened to the Federation in the future?" And I said, "You know, why is it quite dark? Why is it, you know, wanted to go against the current morals of the Federation?" And I thought of a very nice TNG tie-in that would work really well. Oh, it won't be used, and I'm going to say this outright. This is not.
My Con Empire theory didn't get used.
Yeah, your and this one won't work. But do you remember season 1 of TNG? Do you remember the?
Oh, I could forget classic episodes such as Code of Honor.
Do you remember the episode Conspiracy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that
Starfleet Command was all bug monsters.
And I'm wondering
someone about that, right?
I'm wondering if 1,000 years in the future, that signal that was sent out at the end has actually reached somewhere and come back, and it's a second go at this. Did the
That's not a bad call, Dan. That's not a bad call.
Did the bug monsters return? You know,
Great tie-in.
It would be an amazing TNG tie-in.
I can't see it, but it would be a fantastic tie-in if it did, wouldn't it?
That's not a bad call, actually, Dan. That's not a bad call at all.
Yeah, definitely like that.
We haven't seen anyone from the new Federation eat a meal yet, have we?
No.
It's a pile of maggots.
Pun was intended, Neil. Thank you.
I know it's not going. I know that they're not going to go down that route. I 100% say that.
Dan, I wouldn't be so sure.
Now I'll tell you what. Here's another interesting one. Similar to the tie-in, is it that the Federation and Starfleet are now separate, or is it that there's maybe another organization masquerading as either Starfleet or the Federation? So a comment that's just come in: is the Vidrash a semi-religious sect spawning from Terralisium or another place that we haven't seen yet? Now, you could also say that it's a nice point, but are the Vidrash this potentially the organization masquerading as the Federation? Because a lot of people seem to be using the term Vidrash, certainly at the start of the season.
Can you help me with that, Carl? Because I don't understand any of that.
Okay, so the Vidrash was originally mentioned in the short trek Calypso. So the guy in the escape pod that lands on Discovery in Calypso was running away from the Vidrash. That's the first time it was mentioned, and then it was also mentioned at the start of season 3 of Discovery in the second episode, I think it was, where they're doing like the Western scene one. And Zira, the bad guy in that, he mentions the Vidrash as well, and it's been brought up a couple of times. Now, the Vidrash, if I remember correctly, Michael Chabon, who was obviously showrunner for season 1 and who helped out with the short treks, including Calypso, he did confirm that Vidrash is basically a way of, I can't remember what the term was that was used, but it's basically a meaning of the word Federation, almost like a Pig Latin type word. But he did confirm that it means the Federation, the term Vidrash. And everyone seems to refer, in season 3 Discovery, everyone seems to refer to this organization, the Vidrash, with really quite nasty feelings, as if they're this big evil empire. So is it possible that the Vidrash is either Starfleet or the Federation, or someone masquerading as them?
I think in what we've always seen of Trek, all the empires or civilizations that have a problem with the Federation have always misinterpreted what it stood for. Always, you know, be it the Klingon Empire, be it the Romulan Empire, be it whoever. The Federation, when it's shown in a bad light, which they do very well, which is what I like about the Terran Empire things, it can come across as being some sort of fascist, you know, organization. So yeah, that fits with that. People misunderstanding what the Federation is, or possibly not misunderstanding, because that's what it's become.
I'm loving that comment that's just come in as well, Carl. If you'd like to put that one
on myself, actually. So a theory that's been popped in. So most nations on Earth suffer a civil war over ideological differences of some kind. Could the Federation have had a civil war, and the burn was a WMD used by one of the factions in that war?
Part of the military coup, definitely. I think that's a very good shout.
Yeah, that's a nice idea. I like that.
I wondered as well from this week's Discovery, and if you haven't seen this week's Discovery, I do apologise. You know, you are on a Discovery chat, and I apologise if I ruin it for you. There was the point where
in the wrong place. Yes.
Yeah. There was a point where in the Mirror Universe, Giorgio was told that the Klingons and the Andorians and the Vulcans and the Tellarites were all forming a coalition to go against the Terran Empire.
Yeah,
I wonder whether a similar thing has happened in the Prime Universe, and this is where the Emerald Chain has come from. I wonder if the Emerald Chain is actually people that initially started as, if we go by the basis that the Federation and Starfleet have fought off, is the Emerald Chain, was it then the Federation's military arm going against Starfleet, or their resistance against Starfleet? Will eventually Discovery realize what's happened and join the Emerald Chain to fight Starfleet, realizing that they're bad and they're not representing it?
I'd like to jump in there before James does, and just very quickly, because I know it's kind of like it's a given that, well, surely by now Discovery would have looked at history's records and seen anything they're not happy about. But more importantly, surely by now the Discovery ship's subconscious, which we now know is an artificial intelligence, which is built into the ship, which is constantly guarding them and trying to help them. Surely that, they call it the sphere data, don't they?
Yeah.
The sphere data, the subconscious, by now will have analysed all and every data possible, and it would be like, hang on a minute, something's not right here.
It's extrapolated the position of the Guardian, isn't it, with past and future information?
So if we're believing, or if we're following the plot that Disco 3 is taking with this sphere data, acting as a subconscious, looking after the Disco crew, surely it would have scanned the history records and come up with stuff and gone, actually we're at the wrong Federation here, guys, if it really was the wrong Federation. So perhaps this is the only Federation.
Unless, because Discovery would have only received the updated databases that the current Starfleet Commander wanted them to have.
True, but they've been all over the shop since. They've been here, they've been there.
Do they have Wikipedia in the 32nd century?
Oh, definitely, yes, absolutely.
So another one here. I wonder if the Gorn blowing up subspace communication.
Gemini is a lovely word, isn't it? I think it can only be beaten by archipelago.
Oh, I quite like dodecahedron, though.
Oh,
that's an interesting point made about the communications part. If you think back to episode 1, which I think at the time we all unanimously said the last 7 minutes or so was the best part of that episode. Now, if you think back to that 7 minutes, the guy in charge of the Federation relay station said that a few decades ago he'd lost communication with anything outside of however many light years it was, but he'd lost long-range communications. That had only happened a few decades beforehand, so that means potentially half a century. All these Federation subspace relay stations and stuff were all still connected long after the burn.
I think
suddenly knock out communications.
I think the purpose of that was to demonstrate the effect that Bernard had on isolating everyone.
Yeah,
so it's I wouldn't get too involved in how that's affecting plot, though. That's
I thought that, but then remember a couple of nights ago, and it's not Discovery related, but I can link it back. Remember a few nights ago where we sat down and we watched the premiere episode of Picard again, and I mentioned something, the scene where they're at the Daystrom Institute. I mentioned a line that said that blatantly tells us what happens in the final episode of Picard for the season. But because you were only watching it in the first episode and you didn't have the context of the whole season, you didn't even think twice about it. But then when you rewatch it, you think, Jesus, they actually told us point blank, blatantly who was going to appear in the last episode. And there was no two ways about it. It wasn't here nor there. They blatantly told us, but you didn't get the context of it at the time.
Yeah, I was astonished when Barbara Streisand turned up.
Now, I'm wondering if they've done
Barbara Streisand.
I'm wondering if they've done anything similar with Discovery. Some of the things maybe mentioned in that first couple of episodes will have big meanings in the last ones. We just don't know it yet.
We haven't seen
the TV show Alias.
No.
Well, Alias is a sort of spy-fi thing, and it has a branch of the CIA called SD6. And SD6 turns out not to be part of the CIA at all. And hardly anyone who works for it realizes it's not part of the CIA. It's a clandestine organization that's grown up almost as a cancer within the CIA, and does its own agenda. And I'm wondering, sorry, I've gone back a bit, but this is what I'm thinking. Your theory is as to what Vance and the Starfleet that we are seeing might be.
Yeah, i.e. not the Starfleet and Federation we know.
But not necessarily understood by anyone apart from the people right at the very top of it. I mean, it actually isn't Starfleet.
One of the other things that's probably worth thinking about is if we go back to what we call Golden Age Starfleet, where we all sort of know, Enterprise D up to technology, that sort of section, cross section, and it starts out as exploration, and then it's the Borg, and then it's the Dominion, and there's the Cardassian War, and it's getting more and more military, and you have to wonder if we don't know what happens at the end of Voyager onwards. We know through books, which aren't obviously now classed as,
Yeah, they're beta, aren't they?
Yeah, so you have to wonder, was that the beginning of Starfleet going more and more military and less the the grand exploration. What happened? We don't know that.
Because it's an insurrection. Remember when we were explorers.
I've been researching this a fair bit just by coincidence, because I've been looking at
this evening.
yes, a lot of coincidence. So I've been looking for some tie-ins for when Cisco was involved with designing the Defiant. For purposes I won't disclose now, but I've been looking into it a lot, and it's very interesting that what we do know canonically is the biggest kind of problem Starfleet have with it is like, we're not building a warship. We don't do that. That's not what the Federation do. This is an escort ship. This isn't a warship. It's an escort class ship. Yet the end of DS9 was pretty much the end of what we saw of the golden era of Star Trek, and there were a hell of a lot of Defiant class ships out there. So
Voyager was off doing its own thing at the same time, wasn't it? But it was divorced from the rest of the
that's the way Starfleet was going.
You have to wonder after so many wars and things, how easy would it have been for a clandestine part to manipulate the politics of the Federation to become more and more warlike?
A few years down the line, we get Picard. One of the great lines from the first episode is Picard himself shouting, "It was no longer Starfleet." And after all those events, you know what? It's not unsurprising to realise that's what happened. Now, if you then link that back to Discovery Season 3, after an event like the burn, is it not plausible that something similar happened? They basically turned around and said, look, we're going to look after ourselves. Anyone who wants to come along for the ride, we will class you as Starfleet and the Federation. If you don't, on your bike.
It's certainly
not their principles, but maybe that's where the splits happened.
I think one thing I'd like to hear some theories about is why we've heard nothing really about the Romulans in Disco Season 3. Is that because it's going to give too much away about what's going to happen in Picard, perhaps?
Well, we have. They're living back in Vulcan with the Vulcans, aren't they?
It makes me wonder.
Yeah, actually named Vulcan.
Yeah, but we don't know about what led. How did that pan out? We know it didn't. We know it didn't work when the star blew up, don't we? So it's how they got to that is
I mean, the cynic in me is thinking of that Albert Einstein quote that if you do the same thing over and over again, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again but expecting different results. Yeah. And is it that the Federation went back to being explorers and more wars broke out and they met more races that tried to kill them? Yeah. Did they have to adapt? Was it?
Well, it's a given, doesn't it? Every so many races they encounter do attempt to exterminate them or to confront them. It's the same with any empire that expands. Eventually, it meets someone who pushes back.
Sorry, I can't remember who said it about half an hour ago about the season 1 of TNG with the things in the back of the neck taking them over. Job, I'll put some money on that.
You're liking that, aren't you?
I really do.
The very last couple of seconds of that episode is the signal going out.
I've got there's something in that.
The director did say that was a sort of homage to 50s sci-fi.
All
in case something was going on. But I mean, it's a thread, it can be picked up.
I'm thinking that's got something. I really am thinking that's got something to do with it. Not being the Federation. Quite right.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you who's got the big one inside them. If that's the case, that's Kovic.
Yeah. He's masterminding things behind.
Absolutely. Or the Cronenberg character.
Yeah.
CBS. If you need writers for season 4, we've got a plot sort of going here. Right?
Now, just moving back to refocusing to the theorizing part of this again. So the last question that I picked up on from one of the channels was this one. And someone had said, so effectively they were asking, from what we know of Discovery Season 3 so far, the next 3 episode titles are The Citadel, The Good of the People, and Outside. And based on those titles, can we theorize what might be coming for the finale of the show across these 3 episodes?
Yes, it's very obvious. It's the transition of power from Donald Trump to Joe Biden.
Wrong. Right, I'm going to have a guess on this. I'm going to take a stab on this. So the Citadel is meeting the people who are essentially the resistance. The good of the people could be realizing that they're on the wrong team. And outside is some sort of battle where they're essentially flung out from Starfleet and once again left as their own unsupported ship in the galaxy, now not only being pursued by the Admiral chain, but also being pursued by Starfleet across season 4.
So are these the final 3 or just
These are the final 3 episodes?
These are the final 3 episode titles.
Does this take us to New Year's Eve, which is the 800th episode of Star Trek?
Mm.
So what do you think? 3 episodes?
If there is a resistance,
Glorious resistance.
can the leader be René Artois, a French cafe owner who is responsible for hiding British airmen who were escaping from the Nazi scourge? Oh no, hang on, I've got confused there.
I think the Citadel stinks of. I say stinks in a good way. I think that'll be filler. I think we've got a little offbeat episode there where they've got to defend some castle or whatever, and it'll be fun. I think that'll be quite good.
Yeah,
the next one,
part of a city, isn't it?
I don't know now where are we because it's gone. But the good of the people, whatever it was, that sounds very much like Discovery branching away from the Federation a bit and making some decisions themselves.
Making them
and the last episode name I can't remember because it's gone now.
Outside.
I wonder if
Hey, step outside.
I do wonder if Discovery will say, let's go. We can go anywhere. Let's go.
Do you think they go themselves, or do you think they're going to be shunned?
Well, no. I wonder if they'll make the decision that look, if we want to be part of what the Federation stands for, let's go maybe to the Delta Quadrant or something, and let's just go.
Oh, I like that comment from Barry.
Let's have a look. I quite like that one that Stress Free just put up as well about the Ready Room clip. I did see the Ready Room clip. And yeah, I think we may well get some stuff there. I think there's definitely got to be more to come from Adira and their connection with the symbiont and the knowledge that, because, you know, if as we've seen so far, Grey has got the ability to hide themselves from Adira, then the other former hosts have as well. So, you know, maybe Senna is not giving out the information because it's just not the right time at the moment. But yeah, so the next comment was the good of the people. Disco might turn against Starfleet after they discover a dark secret about the burn or something similar. Yeah, I like that. I think the way the episode titles read, that's quite a good shout.
No, I do remember when we talked very quickly about the clips you were going to use for today. Off the topic, the one with JeanLucs Message. I said he sounded awfully Leonard Nimoy towards the end.
Did he?
Yeah, he really does.
Let's listen to that again.
This is Admiral Senatol. I will wait for any who would join us on Earth. Anyone who still believes in us. The Federation lives on, but we need...
Is he at Starfleet headquarters?
I think it's purely down to the distortion effect they've put on there.
Yeah, that bit where the Federation lives on, it sounds very Nimoy.
Yeah. It's just suggestive to me that, you know, 12 years ago, Starfleet still existed. Senatol was part of Starfleet, but he's specifically talking there about anyone who believes in the ideals of the Federation, it lives on.
I'm calling it now. Right, last episode of the season of Disco. Discovery is going to mushroom off to the Delta Quadrant and have some fun over there. And
it's going to fly on a carpet of magic mushrooms.
Yeah, and we'll see a few more friends we know from the Delta Quadrant and revisit that.
Maybe.
And the last shot of the last shot we see of Discovery in season 3 will be, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the Admiral's name now.
Vance.
The guy from Resident Evil. Yeah. Will be him eating some freaking worms.
You're loving that, aren't you?
I think he's got it. I
I'll tell you what, I would love that to happen.
I think he's got it. That'd be it. The last scene will be Discovery going off the Delta Quadrant, go and kick some ass with the Kazon, whatever, and then we'll have
Kazon.
Yeah, with the tinfoil and everything, and then we'll have Admiral Resident Evil eating some mealworms.
I think the best theory we've had so far, to be honest, is Aaron's one that there was some sort of civil war between the Federation and Starfleet and the WND.
I think, yeah.
I think that's definitely. Let's throw that one up again so that we can see it. So it's the most nations of Earth suffer a civil war over ideological differences of some kind. And could the Federation have had a civil war and the burn was a weapon of mass destruction used by one of the factions? I think that's a great shout.
And I'm wondering if when we had the episode with Navarre and they were saying that they thought they'd caused the burn, I wonder if they helped create the technology and Starfleet manipulated it in a way that, for instance, the Genesis torpedo was meant to bring life, but was eventually used as a weapon. Did they take something that was meant to be a mode of transportation and do it so it just backfired horrendously?
The Federation destroying the ability to travel is going to be the way to do it.
I've just had a thought.
Go on.
I'm trying to think now. Star Trek science. How can you explain it all happening simultaneously?
What, burn?
Yeah. There's only one thing I can think of.
It didn't. They've already established it wasn't simultaneous. It had an origin point.
Yeah, but there was fraction.
Very, very small period of time.
Yeah.
Fraction of a second, but. There's only one piece of Star Trek technology really that's been exposed to us that could possibly connect everything at once like that. That's the mycelial network. What if Discovery is responsible for the burn?
Well, there was, when you think back to season 1, part of the reason they had to destroy Giorgio's Mirror Universe flagship was because it was sucking the life out of the mycelial network that connects all planes of existence.
I reckon Discovery is responsible for the burn. Coming through the
if it does that, why does it arrive after the burn has happened?
Well, during their travel through the wormhole, something again that was prominently mentioned in the first couple of episodes, and we've never heard about it again, were the unusual gravitational waves that they encountered on their journey to the future. And it was mentioned 2 or 3 times across the first 3 or 4 episodes. And then it's never been mentioned again since. But it was really prominent whenever they mentioned it.
Well, let's talk about one of Gene Roddenberry's other great achievements: Andromeda and time dilation. It could be as simple as that. What only took so long? Discovery going through the wormhole. They thought it took them, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, Burnham popped out at a different point from. Discovery that they can science explain away that quite obviously, but I'm just trying. Can anyone else think of anything other than the mycelial network that could connect everything at the same time?
Yeah, well, it can blatantly connect different planes of existence, so multiple universes. I don't see any reason why it couldn't connect different times as well.
Are we definitely ruling out this being directly the fault of John Barrowman?
So, James, if you had to, going back to this question that was raised here, if on these 3 episode titles, so Dan's given an opinion, Richard's given an opinion, if you had to summarise what you think is going to happen in the last 3 episodes of Discovery based on these titles and what we already know, what would it be?
The only thing I think I can surmise based upon the pattern of Discovery so far is that there's going to be a lot of crying.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the only thing I can draw from Discovery to date. I don't think you can draw anything or infer anything from these episode titles.
So,
possibly a lot of hushed whispering to camera, making it bloody irritating trying to understand what people are saying.
I mean, I'm just looking now at the Discovery Season 3 episode titles. Now, bear in mind that we've obviously seen up to the current episode.
Yeah.
If I were to give you the episode titles, how close could you have guessed it as regards the plot? And it was
of all the episodes. Go on, start with number 1.
Okay. I was going to go with a couple of different ones actually. Okay.
Well, take us through them chronologically, Dan.
Yeah, let's hear it.
The Hope Is You Part 1.
So The Hope Is You Part 1. The season has always centered around Burnham. I probably would have said it was indicating she's going to be the savior of everything.
Yep.
It sounded to me very much like a book my wife was reading for her book club.
Was it a struggle by one individual in particular?
So here we go. Let's keep going. So I'm just going to pick random titles out because there were some that are very blatant, but we'll pick the more easy one. Forget Me Not.
Book club.
That one I kind of guessed because of what had happened at the end of episode 3.
Which one is it?
Yeah. So episode 3 was when we first got introduced to Adira. Forget Me Not was episode 4 where they reconnect with the symbiont.
They get the symbiote's memories.
Oh, remember the
symbiont finally manages to communicate with the host.
Scavengers, which is obviously scavenging for Starfleet technology. That was obviously always going to be that.
I like that episode. That's a good episode.
It was an all right episode, that one, but they weren't scavenging for the Starfleet technology as such. They just wanted the black box, didn't they? And also the people. They were after getting Book back, and they managed to snag Rin as well.
Unification Part 3 was very blatantly always going to be a Vulcan Romulan episode. And
but yes, it was a lead on from the Vulcans and Romulans unification process, but it also kind of matches in with the start of reunifying Navarre to the Federation because of what it does in it.
Something that's interesting, the upcoming episode, The Good of the People, the one that we think might be the big one, especially as someone said in the comments, let me just hear you put it, Good of the People might be...
I think the Good of the People is going to be a big breakaway episode. I think Discovery are going to turn around and go, you are not the Starfleet we know and love. See you later.
Yeah, somebody put like The Good of the People might, I think it was Richie who said, could be the big, big reveal episode of what's wrong with Starfleet and all the rest of them things.
I think it could well be when Discovery decide that this isn't what we were looking for.
Yeah,
that episode is actually being directed by Jonathan Frakes.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Now,
that's usually market quality.
See, my theory is I like the idea of Starfleet and the Federation being separate entities. At odds with each other, but not enemies. And I think Vance is obviously head of Starfleet. I think Senatal was potentially trying to lead what he believed the Federation was. He was on Earth to maybe try and bring them back into a fold of some sort. I think the Citadel is going to be a stronghold of said maybe underground movement, if you will, of people that Senatal had already brought back together that were trying to rebuild the Federation anyway. So potentially that's what the Citadel is. And that, like we've said, the good of the people, I think they're going to realise, for the good of the people and for what we believe in and what we believe the Federation is, this ain't working. We're not going to be part of this Starfleet. It's not what it should be. And then outside is the fact that these guys have gone it alone now to try and rebuild what they believe in.
Now, Citadel, it actually says that the director has not yet been announced. It says TBA. But it says the writer of that episode, who is Anne Cuffell Saunders, it's the same lady who wrote Scavengers. So,
all right,
it's the same writer for both episodes.
One thing I'd like to ask your opinions on, chaps, is that do we think that Discovery is going to stay? Or are we fairly convinced that Discovery is going to move on either in time or in space away from where we're seeing it now?
Don't think. Oh, maybe into. You know what? Until you said that, I wouldn't have necessarily
space
in time. But way back, again, bringing Mr. Michael Chabon into this, his original intention for a new Star Trek show was one that didn't take place in a fixed time period. I think we've spoken about it before on the Let's Talk Trek show many moons ago when we first started. His original intention was a ship and a crew that went from place to place to place throughout time and showed us so many different things that were happening. And that was never really going to be possible without something there to help them do it. But now they've got the Guardian.
Well, they've not just got the Guardian, they've got the sphere data, which is controlling the ship, which is making... For me, it's teeing up a series almost a bit like Lost in Space.
Potentially,
is what it feels like. I think whatever's happening at the moment with the Federation and the big reveal, I think that's going to be put to bed this season. I think Discovery is either going to move to the Delta Quadrant or forward in time, or possibly even back in time. I think it's going to go somewhere, and I don't think that Discovery is going to stay where it is beyond this season. And I think that'll be the cusp of every season from now for Discovery. I think it'll move somewhere.
It's
You know,
nice.
the Enterprise J was meant to be able to travel between galaxies and even dimensions. That was 26th century. So Discovery might leave the Milky Way altogether. It may leave the Prime Canon universe altogether.
Well, thanks to the mycelial network, it's got those options, hasn't it?
It could be like sliders.
Oh, that's an interesting theory put up. So we've been saying about, Starfleet's the nasty side and Federation, if they have separated, is the good side. But what if it's actually the other way around? What if Starfleet are the ones that are trying to do it right and the Federation are the ones who got it wrong? You
can't blame any militaries for getting fed up with politicians.
I mean, one thing.
Vance and Starfleet, not quite the same as we're used to, but at the end of the day, they are in severe triage mode.
One other thing that's this is my last thing I'm going to mention, because obviously I appreciate time sort of getting on. Adira has had, as we've said, at least three Starfleet officers as a previous host that we know of. What if this has been like a really slow sort of thing, and the symbiote's been trying to work against it over a period of time? But why have we not heard from any of the other Starfleet symbiotes yet? Or Starfleet hosts through Adira yet? What if this has been the long game that's being played?
Very long game.
Very long game.
I think there's a few things we can take as fact. Number one, the last shot of this season will be the Admiral eating some worms. Number two,
or Michael Burnham crying.
Burnham or Tilly crying, and number two, I do think whatever happens, Discovery will be moving on somewhere.
The littlest hobo.
That's fact.
We don't have long to wait to find out.
Nope. So we've just had one last quick comment in there. So I think Disco, the Kelpians, and the Navari will help rebuild the Federation and return it to its true ideals.
That's a nice thought.
It is.
And the Navari.
So that would be the combination of the Vulcans and Romulans on Navarre.
Right, yes.
And maybe the Turbulans might join them as well.
I think they're all going to be eating worms.
We shall find out more next week, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So I think we'll call it to a close there, gents. We believe it or not, we've been going an hour. So
what did we conclude, Carl? What did we learn?
I just did that.
We theorized a huge amount of wildly speculative ideas. Each came up with fairly varying theories, and I guess at the end of the day, we're just going to have to sit and watch for another 3 weeks to find out if any of us were right.
My money's still on Dan. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think he's got it.
The whole way.
Writers' room at CBS.
We are available for script consultation. But until next week, thank you very much for joining us, guys. Obviously, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. And we'd love to hear your thoughts and comments, both on Discovery Season 3 so far and any of the theories that you've heard this evening. So until next time, guys, we'll obviously have our review video out following next week's episode. Don't forget to tune in again next week to Let's Talk Trek, 9 o'clock UK time. And we shall see you very, very soon, folks. Thank you very much.
Pipski.
Bye-bye.